She was talking to Jeff Cordell, for after overhearing the conversation in the dining room, she had decided she must cultivate him and learn what he knew. Did you ever kill a man, Jeff? He looked at her quickly. Well, I reckon I have, man. I suppose there aren't a good many of us who have killed a man or two. Not that we want to or are looking for. These are rough times, man. And a man can't always look to the law to defend him. He has to do it himself. Out here, the law expects a man to do just that. How about that day on the trail when Rod Morgan killed Reuben Hart? Jeff gave her a sharp look. He knew enough of the gossip to know Loma had come west to marry Morgan. He also knew that now Mark Brewer was riding herd on the girl. He had his own opinion of Brewer, and it was not flattering. Jeff Cordell had rustled a few head here and there, and occasionally stood a stage on its ear for drinking money. But he had a wholesome respect for a decent woman. Ma'am, would have my high for saying this, but you ask an honest question, and you'll get an honest answer. If Rod Morgan had been a mite slower to shoot that day, he would have been killed. Reuben Hart was sent out there to kill him. Sent by whom? Jeff Cordell had taught all he planned to. He was turning to leave when the door opened and a big man with white hair came into the room. He glanced at Jeff, then at her. Cordell, he said sharply, they need you at the ranch. Yes, sir, I was just leaving. He tipped his hat and walked quickly away. Loma knew instinctively that this was Henry Childs. He was not a bit like she had expected. He was a big, kindly-looking man with white hair and gray eyes. His mouth was unusually small and his lips thin, but he was a handsome man. Cordell turned at the door. Boss? Childs turned sharply, impatient, and showing in every line of his face. Cordell, boss, I found out who the other man was, the one we saw the other day. His handle is Josh Shipton. Loma's eyes were on Childs, and she was shocked by the change. His mouth started to open, his features stiffened, and for a moment she thought he was about to have a stroke. Childs seemed no longer aware of her presence. For an instant, his face became cool and harsh. Jeff, tell Mark I want to see him. Find him now and tell him. Now, do you hear? M. Shipton bustled into the room. Did I hear somebody use the name Shipton? Yes. Loma said that Childs left. It was Jeff Cordell. He said he'd seen a man named Josh Shipton. Why, that no-count blather skit. I thought he was dead. If I get my hands on him, I'll... She left the room suddenly, breaking off in mid-sentence. Loma went off out to the wide porch and sat in one of the rockers, spreading her skirt carefully. Too many things were happening too suddenly. There were too many tangled threads and too much of what that demanded explanation. Whatever else Cordell might be, she felt he was being honest with her, and now she doubted that any of the others were. She must somehow arrange to talk to Jed Blue, that he had been in town several times since Morgan had killed Dally Hart. She knew. From where she sat, she could see him if he returned from town today, and she meant to be ready. She'd been a fool to let Rod go thinking she was promised to Mark Brewer. He had proposed, but she had not accepted. She had simply told him she needed time, that everything was so mixed up that he would have to wait. Fortunately, it cost little room and board at Shipton's, and she had little money left. Not enough to go home, but enough to go on to Denver. She considered that, but nothing could make her forget Rod. It was 2 days later that she saw Blue ride into town. He was always avoided the gem saloon, where he might run into enemies, going straight to the supply store and buying what he needed. She was becoming sufficiently attuned to Western life to see that she was always careful before entering or leaving a building. Now she saw him come out of the store and start for his horse. No one was about, so she arose, walking down the trail toward the old well, where she occasionally went. Once out of sight of the boarding house, she caught up her skirt to keep from tripping and ran down the path. Panting and somewhat disheveled, she arrived at the trail edge just as he appeared. She stepped into plain sight and waited until he rode up to her. "Mr. Blue, I must talk to you. Are you alone?" "Yes." He glanced around quickly and then walked his horse into the bushes across the trail. Then she followed. She was surprised to find a small rustic footbridge across the creek and an old mill pond, the mill no longer in use. Quickly she had told him what she had learned, even child's shock on hearing him. Josh Shipton. Blue chuckled grimly at that, and then she told him of Cordell's certainty that Rod would be killed. "Mr. Blue, how is Rod? I wish I had to do it all over. I was such a fool, but it was also different from what I'd known. I just wish I had listened to what you said on the stage." "Rod's coming along all right, ma'am. I'm just afraid this trouble is all coming to a head before we're ready for it." You say that when Charles heard about Shipton and he sent for Brewer? Now, what do you know about that? What's wrong? "Ma'am, you better keep clear of Mark Brewer. As long as you know so much, you better know this. Somebody has been doing Charles' killing for him, and I know he wants Shipton dead. So who does he send for?" "Mark Brewer." "Oh, no, you must be mistaken." Even as she said it, she remembered the gun. "Mr. Blue, I do know this. When he was told Rod that he didn't carry a gun, he lied. He wears one in his shoulder holster." Blue was pleased. "Now then, ma'am, that's the best news you've given me so far. That little item might save my life or Rod's. Why should Mr. Childs want Josh Shipton killed?" Jed Blue hesitated. There's the question behind this whole affair. Only two men know what happened in Buckskin run-in when that gold vanished. One of them was Henry Childs, the other one is Josh Shipton. He smiled widely. "Trouble is, for them at least, that a third one has figured it out. And I'm the third. Ma'am, you go back there and tell them you met a man on the road and don't describe me. Who told them to tell them that Terran Cop is back." She was seated in the small sitting room at the boarding house when Mark Brewer came in. Before she could speak, he went up to his room, and when he returned, he was dressed for the trail. He walked over and sat down beside her. I hear you met Henry Childs. Quite a fellow, isn't he?" "He's big," she admitted, "and a fine-looking man." Then, giving her face a puzzled expression, she asked, "Mark, who is Terran Cop?" If she had expected a reaction, she was not disappointed. He started as if stung, grabbed her wrist in a grip that hurt. "Who? Where did you hear that name? Please don't, you're hurting me." She rubbed her wrist as he released it. "It was nothing at all," she spoke carelessly. "I got so restless here, and I took a walk over by that old mill. It's so quiet and so peaceful there. And I met a man. He was very polite. Actually, he was just watering his horse there and at the mill pond, and he asked me if I wasn't living at M. Shipton's. I told him I was, and he asked me to tell him Henry Childs that Terran Cop was back." Mark Brewer got to his feet. "He said Cop was back? What did he look like?" "Oh, he was just a man, tall as you, I think, but spare. He was riding a black horse. The horse Jed Blue had riding was Blue Roan." "This changes everything," Brewer muttered, talking more to himself than her. "Who is Terran Cop? What is he?" "Oh, he was just an outlaw who was active out here 15 or 20 years ago. It's believed that he was the one who robbed those wagons you've heard about. He turned toward the door. Look, if Henry Childs comes in, tell him what you just told me, will you? Tell him I need to see him. Before noon, Rod Morgan reached the basin. After lying among the rocks for about 20 minutes while studying the terrain to be sure he was unobserved, he went down to the edge of the pool and, putting his rifle down beside him, he began to cast with a heavy iron hook. He would cast the hook out as far as possible, letting it sink to the bottom and slowly drag it back to him. He worked steadily, tirelessly, taking occasional breaks to study the country around. He was well into his third hour without finding anything but broken branches or moss when the hook snagged on something. Twice he'd slid off before it held, and then hand over hand, he drew in his catch. A wagon tire. An iron wagon tire, showing evidence of having been subject to heat. So then they must have burned the wagons, thrown the metal parts in the pool, and what about the gold? He was squatting beside the wagon tire when he heard the sharp, ugly bark of the rifle. He hit the ground and dived from his squat, grabbed his rifle, and rolled over behind a rock. He was lying, waiting for another shot, when he realized the bullet had come nowhere near him. Starting to lift his head, he heard two more shots, quick, sharp, fired only a breath apart. Stones rattled. A larger one plopped into the basin, and then Rod caught a fleeting glimpse of the man's body falling. There was a terrific splash, and the body sank from sight. Peering up, he saw a shadowy outline, a man's figure atop the cliff, peering down. Then the shadow just disappeared, and jerking off his boots and gun belt, Morgan went into the water. Its icy chill wrenched a gasp from his throat, and then he saw the body, only it was not merely a body, but a man, still struggling to live. Diving low, he slipped an arm around the man's body and struck out from the surface. It was a struggle to get him to the surface and out upon the shore, and the man was bleeding badly. It was Josh Shipton, and one look at his wound in his side, and Rod knew there was no chance. Shipton's lids fluttered. But Brewer, dry ghost me. He waved a feeble arm. Childs. He seemed to be pointing out toward the graves. Was it only one grave? Brewer had killed him, but what had he been trying to say? At what had he pointed? Or was it only a wild gesture from a dying man? Horse's hooves pounded on the side. A racing horse. Rod wheeled, rifle ready. It was Jed Blue. "You all right? I heard shots." Then he saw Shipton. So Brewer got him. "How'd you know that?" Blue explained what Loma told him and what she overheard. He also added a bit about Mark Brewer's shoulder holster. What made Childs so afraid of Shipton? They were afraid of what he knew. Shipton knew all three of the men buried there, and if he saw Hammer Childs, he would smell a rat. And rat is right. What do you mean? Shipton was trying to point at one of the graves. The grave of Henry Kidd. Kidd? Childs? Are you telling me the Kidd didn't die? And there's nobody in that grave? Kidd murdered the other two, cached the gold. Cached the gold, marked the graves so people would grow superstitious about them, and then left the country. Coming back later, he started a ranch and helped spread the stories about the ghosts of Buckskin Run. Smart, Rod admitted. Except for one thing. He accused the wrong man of the murders. He spread the story around that the three had been killed and the gold was stolen by Terrence Kopp. Kopp killed a few men here and there, but all fair fights. He never murdered a man in his life, and that story made him mad. I know. because I am Terran Cop. From far down the canyon, they heard the thunder of racing hooves, a wild cry, and then a shot. Both men turned, rifles lifting. A small black horse was coming toward them on a dead run, and they could see a girl's long streaming hair in the wind. Behind her, some distance away still, a tight group of racing horsemen. "It's Loma," Rod said, "and the Block C riders." Dropping into one knee, he opened up with his Winchester. A rider threw up his arms and dropped from his horse, and the group split, scattering out across the small plain. The black horse swung in and toward the position was reined in. Loma slid from the horse's back into Rod's arms. The black horse wiggled and raced off a few yards, tossing its head with excitement. "Never figured on making a stand here," Rod said. "Jed, have you got plenty of ammunition?" "Plenty. How about you?" "The same." "There's one behind that spruce." He fired as he spoke, and the man cried out, staggering in the open where a bullet from Jed pulled him down. Bullets spattered on the rocks around them, but their position in the small basin around the pool was excellent. A man could stand erect along the pool if he'd still be under cover. A ring of boulders almost surrounded the pool, and a stream of them fanned out downslide from them where the attackers were. Rod turned to Loma. "Can you fire a rifle?" "Just give me a chance. My father taught me to shoot when I was a little girl, only I never shot a man." "You won't get much chance here. Those boys are pretty well smuckered down now. And they aren't about to get themselves killed. Just fire a shot in that general direction once in a while. Jed, I'm going to circle around and try to get whoever it is leading this bunch. My guess is it'll be Brewer. Or Childs, don't forget him." Rod slid back to lower ground, wormed his way through some brush, and descended into a small wash. All of this was on land, he claimed, and over which he had ridden many times. He knew every inch of it. There had been no more than 8 or 10 men in the original group, and at least 2 of them were out of action. Unless he was mistaken, the Block City boys were and had enough. Their loyalty was largely money loyalty. And nobody wants to die for $1, at least nobody in his right mind. He moved swiftly and silently along the sandy bottom, his boots making no sound in the soft sand. He was rounding a boulder when he heard a voice. It was Mark Brewer. "Think we got him, Henry?" "Got him? Oh, sure, we'll finish him off. Send the boys home and dig up that gold. It's high time we dug it up. Something that always kept me from going after it before. Price on gold has gone up, so we'll have money, more money, Mark." "You mean," Brewer's voice was so low, Rock could scarcely hear, "I'll have more." Through an opening in the rocks, Rock could see them now. He saw the surprise and shock on Childs' face turn to horror as Brewer drew a gun on him. "Very simple, Henry. I've been waiting for this chance. I'll have it all for myself. Everybody will blame Morgan and Cop killing you." Childs' hand went to his holster, but it was empty. "Don't bother, Henry. I'll make it easy for you. Listen to your gunman and wait until your rifle is empty. Now I'll kill you. Let the boys finish off Morgan and Cop, and I'll get the gold." The 2 men faced each other across 10 feet of green grass, cut off from view of the Block C riders by trees and boulders over 50 yards of distance. Childs' small mouth tightened until it was scarcely visible. He was sullen and wary. "Well," he said casually, "I guess I had it coming. I murdered good men for that gold." "I never got a penny's worth of it. Now you'll murder me." Of course, we're going out together. His hand flashed in movement, and Mark Brewers 44 roared. Child swayed like a tree in the wind, but kept his feet. In the palm of his hand was a small derringer. He fired, then again. Mark Brewer's gun was roaring, but his last bullets were kicking up sand at Charles's feet. He went to his knees, then to his face and the bloody sand. Child said, I had a gun too, Mark. I was half expecting. He put out a hand for support that was not there. Then he fell, sprawling on the grass. Rod hurried to him. His eyes flared open. You got a mighty pretty girl there, son, he said. The two-barreled derringer slipped from his fingers and he was dead. Rod stood for a moment, staring down at him. Without the stolen money, the man had done well. He had built a ranch, fine herds of cattle on their respective community, and all for nothing. The old murders had ridden him to his death. Rod walked around the bison through the trees, and when he got where he could see the Buckskin riders, he lifted his rifle. Drop the guns, boys. The war's over. Charles and Brewer just killed each other. Jeff Cordell dropped his gun. Damned if they didn't have it coming. He paused. Mind if we look? Come on, but don't get any fancy notions. Too many men have died already. The Buckskin riders trooped over and stood looking down at the derringer that slipped from his fingers. Mark always said he never carried a gun except when he was out in the hills like this. He stooped and flipped back Brewer's coat to reveal the shoulder holster. His kind always want an edge. Cordell started to turn away. You could take them along, Jeff. Take them back down to Cordova and tell them the truth. Why not? All right, boys, let's clean up the mess. When they were gone, Terrence Copp came out of the trees. Wilma was with him. We could have buried them where they fell, Copp said. Rod shrugged. Maybe, but I would want no more ghosts in Buckskin Run. He glanced around at Copp. What name are you using from now on? If we're going to be partners, I better know. Jed Blue. Terrence Copp's a legend. He's from the past. Let him stay there. They walked away together to their horses. Better dig up that gold once for all. We can buy cattle, fix a place for y'all, and I'll take the old cabin. He glanced slyly at Rod. You know where it is? Where you expect to find it? Buried in the grave of Carrie Kidd. Together they rode back down the trail to the cabin on Buckskin Run. Jed Blue looked around them, pointing at the cabin. I never had no home before, he said, but that's home. We're a coming home.